Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Virtue Signal. I'm Bill Whittle here with my friend Alfonso Rachel, and we record 2 of these shows a week. And this is not exactly a 2-part episode, but this particular week, I've got 2 topics that I think are pretty closely connected with each other. So, Zo, you and I have been working on a project on the side, which we will reveal to the BillWhittle.com members the next week or so, and then to the general public a little later. And it's been a bear. It's just been an awful lot of work. So the 2 things I want to talk about, we'll do one this show and we'll do one in the next show, is perseverance and perfectionism. So let's talk about perseverance. Perseverance and perfectionism both have good sides and bad sides to them. So talking about perseverance, it seems to me that in any study of anybody who's succeeded at anything, not just made a ton of money, but somebody who has succeeded at something they really want to do, it is really ultimately attributable to perseverance. It's just plain hard work, but it's more than that. It's hard work and not giving up. The story, I don't know exactly how true the details are, but the story as it's told, certainly the basic of it is true, is that Sylvester Stallone wrote the script for Rocky. He was a complete unknown, and he wrote a great script, and a number of people wanted to buy that script, a number of studios. And Stallone was, eating generic brand cat food. He was really hurting for money. And a number of offers came his way, big offers. And he turned them down because he was determined that he wanted to play Rocky himself. And my understanding of it is that somebody offered him a big hunk of money for the script, and they wanted Robert Redford to play Rocky, who was the biggest star in the world at the time. But he stuck to his guns and he hung in there. And the result was just an amazing movie, and that led to an entire career. So a lot of people talk about, oh, well, he's very fortunate. He was just very lucky, or a nice break. I'm one of those 40-year overnight success stories. You don't know when opportunity's going to knock, but you better have your bags packed. And consistently staying on something that you are determined to do, I think, is the most important aspect of actually doing that thing.
Absolutely, man. Even though the Word of God says, endure in faith until the end. You got to keep on trucking. Just keep going. And even for myself, man, like the things that I'm trying to accomplish, and inventions that I may have, it's like you're going through it, and it's like the what you think that you can accomplish, man, before the season is over, I can have this done. And that season turns into 2 seasons. And that those seasons turns into a year. And those years turn into 2 years. And those 2 years turn into 6 years. It's just going by. It's like, how come I can't? It's like, and you're trying to present this idea to people and these things that you may need, and they're treating you like you're trying to build a time machine. It's like, look, it's not that hard. I've actually built a prototype and all that sort of stuff. And they're just like, no, it can't be done. It's like, look, man, we're putting a rover on Mars. Okay, you mean to tell me that you can't do this? And
one of those rovers is named Perseverance, by the way.
I think that's pretty apropos, and it can be very, very, very frustrating, and things will get in the way, man. As people will say, the life or the world gets in the way, and I don't think, and a lot of some people may perceive people as giving up on their dreams and stuff like that. It's like, no, maybe they just put their energy, they channeled it elsewhere, and just had to do this. To survive or whatnot. And maybe those dreams, they never come to pass, which is really unfortunate. But, it's like, in speaking of Sylvester Stallone, when you're trying to get something developed, you have this in your mind of how this works.
That's right.
I don't want to say, for lack of a better word, your persona is in it. It's kind of built around, who you are.
Your heart and soul are in this,
it's in it,
and you're determined to do it. Yeah.
Yes, and this takes on a lot of things, not just an artistic venture like a movie, but in your very invention, it's built around it and how you can relate it to people and stuff like that. And then you have somebody else who's going to come in and try to rework it and retool it and change it. It's like, no. You're getting away from the whole vision of why I'm doing this. And it can be very frustrating, for when people are trying to do it, but you gotta persevere, man. You gotta stick to it and demonstrate why it works and why it's worth it. And don't sacrifice the quality and the integrity of it. But if I may add, have the common sense to be able to, like, as they say, think outside the box and see, okay, you may see how this works, but it's like a joke. Right? Mm-hmm. Even when you invent a joke, you can't be the only person who gets it. Right? You know what I'm saying?
I'll get to that in a minute. That's kind of the downside of perseverance. Let me save that for a little bit, because you're right. It's easy to point to things like artistic things like movies and stuff, because they tend to be a little bit sharper, and mostly because everybody's experienced it. Most people have either seen Rocky or at least know who Sylvester Stallone is. But you're right, it applies to somebody who wants to open a dry cleaning store. Mm. And this is the thing about perseverance that is so important, is that, like most of the iceberg, all of the perseverance is invisible. It's beneath the surface. When you see people who are successful, you tend to think they just went out and decided to do something and it just happened. And you don't see the failures, you don't see the doubts, you don't see all the times that they in their heart of hearts really wondered, number one, can I do this? And number two, which is even more pernicious really, is this really worth doing? Mm. It's really what it comes down to. When you are applying constant effort to something and you're not getting where you want to go, I think the most common reason people give up is not because it's hard and not even because they're not getting any traction. Because they're not getting traction, they tend to develop doubts. Is this really worth doing? Do I have the skill to do this? I've applied for 17 bank loans. I can't get the money to put in this dry cleaning store. Is this a really good idea? And the kind of perseverance that I'm talking about is, and again, there's a downside to this, which we'll get to, but in its best case, it's a belief in your own star. I don't mean movie star. I mean the star that you're following. This is what I want, and I'm going to stay with it. I have an acting professor who I'll talk about again in a minute on the downside of perseverance, which you probably just call pigheadedness. But this guy said so many profound things when I was a theater student at the University of Florida. His name is David Shelton, and one of the things Shelton said to us in class was, if you're an actor at 20, that means nothing. But if you're an actor at 30, that's a different story. And he's absolutely right. Being an actor, a professional actor, is a tough gig in terms of getting the job. Mm-hmm. It's soul destroying. Yes. You go into a room all excited and you think, man, I've got all this, I've got my look and I've got my thing, and you may have some real talent. You walk into a room and there's 70 people who look exactly like you do, exactly like you do. And the back of their resumes are longer than yours is. And you sit there all of a sudden thinking, well, I thought I was just going to come in and just nail this thing. So it's a tough thing, and it's much lower percentage than Major League Baseball. I mean, I have a friend named Fritz Bronner who was the most successful commercial actor I ever met. And he was getting probably 1 out of every 10 or 12 auditions. That's incredible. That's an incredible record. And so even worse, when you go to an audition in a case like this, I'm trying to build this case for perseverance. When you get there, you're the product. When it's not like you're trying to sell labels to somebody and they say, we're going with the competitor. It's like, no, we don't like you. We just don't think you're good enough. We don't like the way you look or whatever. And you have to go home and live with that. So what David Shelton was saying is, at 20, you can be all starry-eyed and full of enthusiasm, and anybody can be an actor at 20. But if you're going to be an actor at 30, you will have had to have gone through 10 years of this kind of disappointment, this kind of ego smashing. And if you're still at it, then that means either you have some real talent or you have such a deep belief in it that sooner or later you're going to get something. If you're an actor after 10 years of auditioning, then you're really an actor.
Indeed, man, and that's the hardest. Basically, the hardest part of the job is just getting the job. And a lot of people get, we know the feeling, man. It's like, man, filling out a whole bunch of applications, man. Even if you just want to get a job at entry level, you're going to do a lot of footwork to filling out a bunch of applications, all that sort of stuff. You'll put more effort into looking for the job than actually getting the job and doing it. Now, when it comes to something that can be as rewarding, if you will, as getting a job as an entertainer, not even actor, a silver screen actor, just an entertainer. Even a musician or black box theater or anything like that. Man, that's no easy task. It's not easy. I mean, especially when you're thinking in consideration of you're providing a luxury. You're not exactly providing a need. And I mean, those can fall into the categories of need too, like depending on the kind of music that you're making. A business may need a jingle, or they need some music for whatever it is that they're doing, or they need some people to provide a presentation or something like that. Then those can kind of fall into the categories of needs. But overall, when we're talking about entertainment, we're still talking about a luxury, and that's oftentimes a more difficult thing to sell. But if you can get into that place where you're just going to persevere, it's like, this is what I do. This is like, I know that I'm wired to do this, and you're going to persevere. And it's just like you said, man, it can be soul crushing. And if it isn't soul crushing, if it's not necessarily the reward of earning the spot, it's either soul crushing or soul selling. What are you going to do? What are you willing to do to get this part in this machine, right? So that goes into a whole nother thing, but that could take on a lot of things. People who want to do this so badly, and like you said, we'll talk about this a little bit more in depth, the downside of perseverance. Even that goes to the sadder side of what people are willing to do to get there. But like I said, this takes on all kinds of things of just wanting to fulfill your ambition, wanting to fulfill your dream, your passion. And, and if I could say really quick, even like, people will tell there's no formula to it. Like, what's the formula? How do you do? There really isn't one.
That's right. That's right.
People will say, like, even with content, like on YouTube, you have one school that says, dude, just do what you can and put it out there. Just make sure that you're just putting out product. That way people are always seeing what you're doing. You want to make your presence known and all that sort of stuff. And then another school that says, hey man, don't put nothing out there unless it's quality. It's got to be good. There's a lot of competition out there. You don't want to half step nothing. So it's like, you got to balance that between what is it that you're doing? Because it's that kind of stuff where you don't want to look back, 5 years from now and say, dude, I can't believe I did that. But at least, you don't want to be the other person, be like, man, it's 5 years, but I haven't done anything. I've been holding on to this because I don't want to release it until it's right. It's like a person trying to get the girlfriend saying, I don't want to do it. It's like the timing hasn't been perfect. It's like, dude, you don't want her to fall in love with the moment. You want her to fall in love with you.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So it's that kind of approach to things, man, that people fight against.
No, that's exactly right. And every time I think about so many of these virtues that we talk about, I just keep coming back to Booker T. Washington, who I knew about, but then when I did the America's Forgotten Heroes segment about him and really got in depth into what he actually did. I mean, he determined to walk to this school where he was determined to go. His entrance exam was cleaning up a room next door, and he cleaned the room 9 times. He knew how to clean a room. But when he was asked to become the chairman of Tuskegee, he got to Tuskegee. There was no land, there were no bricks, there was no wood, there was no money, nothing. There was nothing there. And he simply had this vision of this brick building, and he didn't let go of it. And he was worried about money all the time. And you never, ever see that. You never, ever see those struggles, those late nights where the person who's become a revered figure like Washington or anybody else who's become very successful, you never see them at night, in bed or just staring at the ceiling and just thinking, how am I going to pay the rent for this? How am I going to get the money for this? And you never see the suffering, and that's really the only word for it, because it is mental anguish to commit yourself to a path and know that you're going to be facing hardships. And the secret to persistence, and the reason that so few people, relatively speaking, so few people actually succeed with their dreams compared to people who have a dream and then just give up on it, is because the hardest part of it is the understanding that things are not going to go well. And this is what I talked about earlier with this project we're working on. I thought I'd just sail through this, every single thing. And then things that I finally had taken 7 months to learn how to do, suddenly they're just not working. I don't know, they're just not. Files corrupted. Okay. And that stick-with-itness is everything. And this is one of the reasons I think that so many people have a distorted view of wealthy people, successful people. They think that just like them, they had an idea, and just like them, they went out, but unlike them, they just sailed through it. They didn't run into all the blockers that they did. And so there's something about this person, maybe they're well-connected, maybe it's their skin color, maybe it's luck, whatever, that they got lucky and I didn't. But what they don't see is, no, they ran into as many or more blockers as you did. It's just they kept going.
Indeed, man. That's exactly right. Because we can, and that's one of the things that can be so frustrating about, this kind of industry where you're dealing with that kind of competition. Just like the audience may see, what they see is the final product. They don't see the work and the frustration that went into it.
It's true for any business, but yes.
But they pretty much just see a cushy job. But even in the competition of it, the person who's engaged in the competition can also be susceptible to that same thing. All they see is a person who got the job because they were lucky and all that sort of stuff, and start creating conspiracies and all that sort of stuff. It's like, hey, they probably worked just as hard to get here as you did. Been at this just as long as you had. This just might happen to be their break. It's not so much a reflection on you. You just probably didn't have at this moment. Doesn't mean that you're not good looking. Doesn't mean that you're not talented or whichever. You just didn't have quite that thing that they needed in this moment, but this person did. A lot of it just comes down to that. And even when, and I kind of want to digress a moment for like when I talk about a need, as entertainers, we're also trying to not just facilitate a luxury, but a utility. There's a utility aspect to what it is that we're doing. And we understand that there's an approach that is needed to promote certain values, sanity. Sanity is really useful. And we want to be able to use these kind of platforms to do that. As far as I'm concerned, that goes beyond, it kind of balances itself between a luxury and a utility. This kind of stuff is needed where we're trying to use these mediums that have been so effective with the destruction, the decline of Western civilization. We'd like to use these same mediums to preserve, sanity, help preserve the republic, the integrity of the republic that is constantly being eroded. And Bill, man, even it's a difficult sell.
Yeah,
it's a hard sell.
Watching things go to hell on a daily basis and not give in to despair, which is the target.
Yes.
Yeah, to just look at all this stuff as, oh my God, what is going on? And then you get up and you keep going. That's where success lives.
Yes. And we're not, and when we say it's hard, we're not trying to sell, disparity or anything like that, or fear mongering or doom and gloom or anything like that. We're trying to remind folks, hey man, shining city on the hill. Remember, that's what we want to promote. And instead of, promoting what people are so given over to with the sensationalism of this fear and all that sort of stuff, but like I said, it's difficult. Unfortunately, oppression sells more readily than freedom does.
Yeah.
It's a really sad thing. And there has to be, and there's not a lot of people who are ambidextrous that way, where they have, the conservative, common sense, practical wiring and balance that with creativity. It's not to say that, conservatives are deficient without saying that liberals are deficient in the area too. Conservatives, we're real world people. It's our personality matrix. We're real world people. We think in practical terms. We are actually critical thinkers. But kind of like the downside to that is that there's a sacrifice of something that usually comes in the form of creativity. We don't live in imagination land. We live in practical land. Whereas liberals, they live in imagination land. They're very creative, right? So, and with that, there's a sacrifice of practicality too. A lot of times I hear people say that Hollywood, the problem with Hollywood is that they're just lacking too much imagination. They lack imagination. The qualities of their productions are going to crap and all that sort of stuff. I would beg to differ with that. I think the problem with Hollywood is that they've got way too much imagination. That's the problem. And they are inundating the culture with an overactive imagination. And that is what's killing the quality. The sustainability of their product. I mean, they're putting out stuff all the time, man, and it's well lit and produced, and the sound and all that sort of stuff. And it really plays to people's fears and their sensationalism and stuff like that. But is there substance to it? No, not really. There's hardly any substance, but it's chock full of toxic imagination.
Well, you mentioned, practicality. I mean, persistence, again, is not just something in show business, it's something that applies to everybody, but there is a downside to persistence. And the downside to persistence is kind of manifested in that common definition of insanity, which is doing the same thing again and again and again and expecting different results. I mentioned earlier David Shelton, who is a wonderful man and who he never picked up the check for students because we would all go out afterwards and have beers, but he usually made up the difference in the tab where you might have a $6 tab and you might put down $4.50. He's probably spent $100,000 or more on students. He's a very good man, but he was exceedingly tough, excruciatingly tough. We all thought he was cruel, and he was cruel. He was our own private Simon Cowell. And it turns out that I didn't know this until I went to a reunion party, his farewell party, many, many years after I was in school. I went back and had a chance to finally talk to him as an equal instead of as a student. And I asked him, why were you so hard on people? Well, you were just brutal. And he said, I was brutal with the people who weren't going to make it. And you think, well, how? And you would hear this, and you often hear this on these failed auditions for like America's Got Talent or American Idol. Somebody comes in and they just do a job that is just so appalling. I can't get enough of these videos, by the way. I watch them all the time. Somebody will come into the room and start singing, and it's beyond imagination, but they're utterly convinced that they're just superstars. Simon Cowell basically smacks him in the face, and for the same reason that David Shelton did. When it's clear that this person has a dream or an ambition to be something that they do not have the means to achieve, it's not a question of perseverance anymore now. Now it's just a question of inability to get there. If you're 5'5" and you want to play basketball in the NFL, it's not going to happen. It's just not. So the downside of like relentless perseverance is kind of pig-headedness. And this can be a real problem too. You were talking about relationships earlier. It reminds me of that line in Dumb and Dumber where Jim Carrey says to the woman, he says, he's got such a crush on her. And she says, I wouldn't go out with you if you weren't the last guy on the earth. And he said, really? If everybody else on the earth, something to the effect of, if everybody else on the earth died, you wouldn't date me then? She says, well, if everybody else on the earth died, then I'd think about it. And he says, so I have a chance. and this kind of thing is just plain delusion. This is the balance. We'll talk about this in the next show about perfectionism. This is the balance. If you're going to stay with something, if you're going to persist with something, you need to overcome all of these emotional roadblocks, financial roadblocks, all of these things that stand in your way. But on the bottom line, you have to have the ability to achieve what it is you want to achieve. And let me rephrase that in a better way. What you want has to be not only achievable, but achievable by you. And here's where we can sometimes run into problems. This is why David Shelton was as cruel as he was to the people who were really awful, and why he said it's different if you're an actor at 30. Because if you have no talent at all, you cannot survive 10 years of failures in auditions or wherever else it might be. So there does come a point where you may be continually persevering at something that is simply unachievable. And the downside of perseverance is there's got to be a point when you really just realize, okay, I have to take a cold-hearted look at this, and this isn't working. It's not going to work. I need to cut my losses And I need to get away from this sunk cost fallacy, which is, I put so much effort into this. If I quit now, all that effort will be wasted. Well, if it turns out you're never going to get there for whatever reason, the fact that you're not giving up now means you're going to invest even more lost time and life into this thing that you'll never achieve.
Man, and ain't that the question though? Ain't
it?
It's because you wrestle with, am I fooling myself? You know,
that's it.
You know what I'm saying? Am I fooling myself? Do I really have not even just the resources, external resources, but the internal resources? Do I really have what it takes to do this? On the other hand, would I be selling myself short? Would I be throwing away a dream that could really be reality?
Now we find those are two overlapping Venn diagrams, and in between them are the people that succeed.
Yes. And like, say for instance, and I don't want to make this all about, I'm just speaking from an experience that I know.
Sure. And me too. This is what we know personally.
And, I've been wrestling with this for years. And one has to consider, we go back to what we talk about, what we're wired to do, or even what we perceive of what we're wired to do. The thing that we've invested our training into, the things that we've tried to refine and develop, and make it an enterprise of what it is that we do. Imagine something you have a skill set that was all of a sudden taken away from you. And then from there, you've got to learn how to do something else. But you got to repeat the thing that you got good at in the first place that was taken away from you. You've got to redevelop and become good at something else.
Yeah, they say that's the 10,000 hour rule.
Yeah.
They say that it takes 10,000 hours to become a master at something.
Yes. Now now I'm more of a jack of many trades and a master of none, but there are some things that I'm better at than something else. And looking at, my career, I wrestle against, like say for instance, we're familiar with content suppression, shadow banning, something and I was one of the early targets. You
were the first person I knew who was shadow banned.
They've been hitting me since as early as 2011. They really ramped it up in 2016. Now, I could go on and on about, the shadow suppression, but I don't want to lie to myself and say, look, if people were really actually interested in my content, and I still have the same 75,000 subscribers on YouTube for the past 6 years. It hasn't grown beyond that. Facebook, over 100,000 page followers on Facebook. Never grew past that for 5 years. Now, if you've got that many subscribers and page followers, you would think that they would come seek your work out. It's like, look, man, I don't know where you are. I'm just going to go to your website. I'm not going to depend on Facebook. I'm not going to depend on YouTube to find your work or to send me notifications or anything like that. I will just come in and go to your website and get your content from there. Or opening your mailers. Like hardly anybody reads when I send out notifications from a mailer. So with that in mind, I'm like, okay, is it because I'm being shadow banned, or is it because I just simply don't have a product that people want? Neither one of them.
That is the question. And the ability to ask that question is what separates successful people from unsuccessful people.
Yes.
The ability to ask that question is something that the people who continue to persevere and who are like laughing stocks, like the people in some of these auditions you see on American Idol and so on, they are incapable of asking that question seriously. That's their character flaw. And when you hear somebody screeching at an audition on American Idol, for example, and the judges are like, "Are you insane?" The response will always be the same. All my friends say I'm a wonderful singer. Everybody I know says I'm a wonderful singer. Okay, everybody that a good singer knows says they're a wonderful singer, and everybody that a bad singer knows says they're a wonderful singer. What do the people who don't know you say? What do the people who don't have any investment in you, have no obligation to you, or not related to you, what do perfect strangers who you've never seen before and will never see again, what do they say? And that's where the truth lies.
Yes. And the thing is, that's another thing that keeps you scratching your head saying, I gotta wonder if my content is being messed with. I remember a time, I almost missed them, Bill. I almost miss trolls. Trolls would come to my page and I'm actually kind of thankful that they don't anymore because I would spend way too much time fighting with them. But the thing is, you know something's going wrong when you don't even see trolls anymore. Trolls drive up engagement. All right, because people want to come in and want to fight with the trolls. Even trolls aren't alerted to, and you know, trolls want to come and rip us apart. They hate us, and they love telling us that they hate us. I don't even hardly see them anymore. That's because even they don't get my notifications, because trolls come in and drive up engagement. They drive up views. YouTube doesn't want that. They want you to stay in the dark. They want you immoralized until you quit. That way they can say this person only did it for the money. I've been accused of that for years. Oh, you're just paid off by a weapons conglomerate or oil conglomerate. There's some big business tycoon. Fox, you're on Fox News' payroll and something like that. I'm like, look, man, if I was on some big company's payroll or something like that, I think my productions would look a lot better and they would be coming to you a lot sooner.
If I'm going to be accused of this, can I please at least get the check?
Right.
You know, I mean, can I at least get the check if I'm going to be accused of being a sellout? Can I at least get the money?
Yes. Right. So it's, these things go along. And once again, Bill, it leaves you in a state of, is this worth it? Am I being messed with? Am I lying to myself? Do I not have the quality to present? Or is it because the quality of what I have is just being hidden from people? So, and that's still a question that it's, rather than beating my head up against the wall trying to answer the question, I just do what I can and just keep moving forward. My tires keep, getting slashed, but I try to pump them things up and keep on trucking. That's all I can do.
It's all you can do. And, I think Mike Rose said, don't follow your dream. He's being arch there, but he is basically saying, as he always does with his incredible common sense and wisdom, by all means pursue a dream, but make sure it's a dream you can achieve, and make sure that it's a dream that's worth achieving. If your dream is to never work and just sit around and read poetry, maybe that's not a dream you shouldn't be following. That'll do it for this edition of the Virtue Signal. Next time we'll talk about perfectionism, which is kind of related to this as well, upside and downside. And you'll see that in just a few days, because this show is made possible by the members at BillWhittle.com who have persevered with us through thick and thin, and whose perseverance and dedication has made this show and all the rest of them possible as well. For Alfonso Rachel, I'm Bill Whittle. We'll see you next time on the Virtue Signal.